Hi and welcome to today's video. In today's video, we'll be comparing 4 cities in Australia that are very popular with international students. As you can see, we'll be comparing living and studying in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. First, let's compare these cities in terms of their populations. As you can see, Sydney has the largest population among all 4, but Melbourne is not far behind. If you would like to live in a city that has a smaller population, both Brisbane and Perth are excellent options. All these cities offer numerous options as far as universities and colleges are concerned. Sydney has 7 universities that are based in Sydney. Melbourne has 8 universities that are based in Melbourne. Brisbane and Perth have 3 to 4 universities respectively. In Sydney and Melbourne, you will have plenty of options as far as colleges are concerned, and the same is true for Brisbane and Perth. Sydney is home to some really good universities, like for instance, the University of Technology Sydney. In addition, University of Newcastle and University of Wollongong are not too far away from Sydney. Melbourne has world-class options like University of Melbourne. Brisbane and Perth too will present you with more options as far as universities are concerned. Now let's talk about the real cost of living in these cities. First, let's look at this comparison between Sydney and Melbourne. Consumer prices are way higher in Sydney than compared to Melbourne. Rent prices are 1/3 higher in Sydney than Melbourne. There's very little difference in restaurant prices. As you can see, Sydney is just 3.3% higher in this area than Melbourne. However, groceries in Sydney are 10.3% higher than those in Melbourne. Purchasing power in Sydney is 15.3% lower than purchasing power in Melbourne. So, controlling the costs is a better option in Melbourne than Sydney. However, there's another significant fact to consider. Wages in Sydney are substantially higher than wages in Melbourne. Now let's look at a comparison between Melbourne and Brisbane. As you can see, consumer prices including rent in Melbourne are 4% higher than those in Brisbane. Rent is also a little more expensive in Melbourne than Brisbane, with an 8% difference. Restaurant prices in Melbourne and Brisbane are almost compatible, with restaurant prices in Melbourne just 4.3% higher than those in Brisbane. Grocery prices are almost the same, whereas purchasing power in Melbourne is actually higher than purchasing power in Brisbane. Now, let's look at a comparison between Brisbane and Perth. Consumer prices in Brisbane, as you can see, are 7.3% lower than those in Perth. Consumer prices, including rent in Brisbane, are 4.8% lower than in Perth. But rent prices in Brisbane are slightly higher than rent prices in Perth. Restaurant prices in Brisbane are substantially cheaper, with an 11.7% difference. Grocery prices in Brisbane too are cheaper than those in Perth. Purchasing power in Brisbane is 2.8% higher than that in Perth. A very important question for students of South Asian origin. Sydney and Melbourne have a very high percentage of the population who originates from South Asia. In Brisbane and Perth, that is not the scenario. Brisbane has only 3.3% South Asians among its population, while Perth has 2.7%. Thanks for watching this video. We hope we have been able to give you a perspective on living in these 4 cities in Australia. For more videos like this on studying in Australia and other countries, like, share and subscribe. To get counselling on Australia or other countries, register at www.studyunifees.io.